Hi, my name is Jonathan Barrett from CelsiusPro. This is number 4 in our series of tutorials on how to use weather certificates. This is number 4 in the series, and this is all about extreme temperatures. Before we kick in, Celsius Pro, I'm the Chief Executive Officer, and this is a tutorial about trying to hedge extreme weather events. And remember, life and business must continue with climate change. And of course, as we know, we've had a lot of extreme temperatures of late, and this year is going to be quite interesting, particularly with El Nino. And what that means is drier, higher temperatures. Also means more frost as well. So I think this is going to be quite a good tutorial. Okay, let's kick off. Right. Um, Extreme temperatures can be detrimental to profits. Well, we know that. Frosts and heat stress, particularly on canola, all cause a concern for yield, particularly on the broadacre cropping. And when you look at it, particularly for wheat, you can get frost burn and stem frost. And when we look at those types of covers, we certainly understand that certain temperatures will cause these. What we do know intuitively is that below -2 will cause stem frost in wheat, and particularly any temperatures around below 0 degrees around anthesis, probably at 10 days after to be more precise, will cause little frolets to shrivel up. And as a result of that, you'll get yield loss, which you won't know until you actually harvest. So very important to try and hedge these events, particularly if you're trying to project yield. Yield loss obviously is something that needs to be hedged, and obviously using a weather certificate can actually do that. Heat stress too. Heat stress is also very important. We find heat stress is mainly used, or certificates to self-guard heat stress are used for canola. It is scientifically proven. In fact, it's scientifically proven for frost as well as heat stress that it does reduce yield quite dramatically. For canola, obviously, once again, round anthesis, if you do get that concern and you do get temperatures over 27, 28 and 30 degrees over a 10-day period, or in fact more so stretched over a little bit longer, then you will experience yield loss. Obviously, the flowering for canola takes a little bit longer time, but anthesis, when it does hit by heat stress, does reduce yield quite dramatically. And as a result of that, you need to hedge that. As we said, all reduce yield quite significantly. When you're defining the risk periods, and we know this is very important, when you define the risk periods, you look for when you can use your weather certificate. And when we look throughout the cropping season, we get a sense of when is the main temperature actually due. And, obviously in my mind, when you look at it, August, September, there are the ones to look at. That's when you can sort of get a sense that it's worthwhile trying to put some cover on by a weather certificate to reduce this yield loss. And here we go. You can see that August through November, frost and heat, frost damage to crop and reduced yield from heat stress. All those sorts of things can be hedged using a weather certificate, and this tutorial is all about how we actually do that. But what we like to do is run through the steps that we think are important for growers to actually look at, and really to get in essence, get a sense of how weather certificates work, so they're not disappointed. We always urge people to read, run through these types of steps so that they really understand what's actually happening, understand the key terms and what they mean. That is so critical. Run through it. There are glossaries. We'll be talking through them. The glossaries are in the contracts and the policies. Do understand them and make time. If you don't understand, ask questions. When you look at it, define the risk period, the risk and the risk period. So if it is protecting yield, then it's going to be temperature. When is the risk period going to occur? When is that time period? And your agronomist will be able to tell you that quite quickly. And he'll say, look, anthesis is here, so therefore I think you should take cover at around here. Make sure you've got the right location. With a lot of weather certificates, it's done on a 5 by 5 kilometre grid reference. That's designed by the BOM. So as a result of that, sort of make sure it is the area where you are farming. Analyze the historical data, super important. Have a look at the data. Now, the interesting thing here, the grid data might show sort of different to what you have at the farm gate. That is because that data is smoothed out. Some growers actually, because they understand the temperature at the local weather station, actually do extreme temperatures and actually use the local bomb station. And that's because they know if it's sort of -5 at their temperature at their bomb weather station, they know they're going to have problems on the farm. They know if it's going to be 30 degrees, they know they're going to have problems on the yield. So sort of it's really up to you. The growers can actually decide whether they want to use the grid data or whether they want to use the weather station data, or whether they just want to sort of use either one of those contracts, in the policy. As I said, we want to link that data. We want to make sure that data works and is fit for purpose for the policy. Define your parameters. We do know where wheat sits, but we want to make sure that the degrees where there is potential concern actually fits in with your historical records. Like you want to know that if the bomb says it's -2, then it's -5 at your place, then you can use either one. But the important thing is to make sure that data is correlated. Okay, you've got to then tailor, once you've got those parameters, tailor the parameters, make sure they fit in well with that risk period, and make sure that these covers are fit for purpose. There is no point taking a cover if in fact the numbers show that it is not fit for purpose. But have a look at it and just be guided by what we can do, and also make sure you can always get in contact with us. This is what we do, and this is how we can help. Purchasing the hedge, that's quite simple. That can all be done within a minutes once you've got that hedge. We also like people to prepare at the beginning of the season. What are the risks that they got and how they're going to prepare? And it might be sort of looking at a dry season, wet season, or a temperature, but have an understanding of what's in your quiver to hedge your yield and your return. And once you have a good understanding of that, then you can start your season with a little bit of confidence. Remember, some of these weather certificates used can actually reduce your cost of funds. Also remember, we also have premium funding. Now, once you do open an account, you can track the progress of your weather certificate online, and you can make sure and check the data as well by looking at any one of the bomb weather stations. Okay, let's get into it. Right, now we're on to the map. Obviously, CelsiusPro, this is where we price up all our weather certificates, so you get a bit of a sense as to how we actually do this. The first one we're going to look at will be all about high temperatures, and then we'll get onto a low temperature, or we'll try and work our way through both of them. When we look at our weather certificates, remember the 8 steps that we discussed earlier. We want you to find your area, zoom into where we think your property is. This is a 5x5 kilometre grid. And what you can do is you can get a look at it and just say, well, look, that is, you can zoom in and we can find out that's exactly where your property is. This is measurements which are conducted by the BOM. They directly feed into our system. You can check all these independently, there's no doubt about it. And of course, we urge you to do that to make sure that the data is fit for purpose. And of course, when you can do that, and if you want to, you can quite easily have a look at any of the bomb sites. And I've done one here for you. This is the minimum anomaly. You can always get the maximum as well. That gives you a sense of the temperatures which have happened around those areas. You can get a GIF of it, a PDF. You can look at the maps. So there's always this data, and this is the data that we use to actually settle any of the contracts. So it is quite important that you get a handle on where you can actually get your data. And this happens on a daily basis, and it goes straight into our systems. You can view the data on CelsiusPro platform, or just you can do it via the BOM. It's exactly the same data, and that's how we be able to settle contracts quite effectively and quite quickly. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at, first of all, we'll have a look at a heat stress contract. This is mainly for canola. As we know with canola, and if you particularly over anthesis, about a 45-day period where if you get heat stress, then you are going to have reduced yield. This is all scientifically proven. I think the temperature is around that 27 to 30 degrees, but what we do know is around that anthesis period, that's when you got the major concern. So here we've chosen a little area, and this is where our farm is. I'm obviously just northwest of Wagga, and let's have a look. So now we go and have a look at the pricer, and we go in there and we have a look at a little contract there, which we're looking for, and we put in the dates that we feel we're at most risk. And when we look at the dates there, we can see, well, I reckon pretty much 1st of August through to mid-September is probably the risk that we would find we would have. And we'll just put 27 degrees in here because we do know that that's a temperature which is going to cause some concern. And as you can see here, 2008, 2009, major concern there, particularly if you're growing canola, because as you can see, you've had looks like nearly 6 heat stress days. And as a result of that, you'd certainly want some compensation for your crop. When we look at some of the terms, we define the risk period, which is obviously important. We look at the strike level. In this case, you want to get paid as soon as the event does happen. So you don't necessarily want a strike in there. If you feel that you do want to, then you think you can weather it, by all means, it'll always reduce the cost. But in my mind, if you get a screamer of a hot day, you want cover straight away. So let's say, for instance, we're looking to protect $450,000 and against those big events. So per stress, per heat day, or per heat unit is what we call it. Per heat unit, you want to get 50,000. What that means is that any day the temperature goes up to, say, 29 degrees in this instance, that is 2 heat degree days, or 2 heating degrees. And as a result of that, you'd get paid $100,000. Okay, so let's look at that. So just to reiterate, because that is quite an important point, when we look at these types of contracts, the 27 degrees, that is the threshold, and we use threshold a lot. Of course, that's all of a sudden, when the cover starts to kick in. The strike level is when the contract starts to pay. In this case, anything over 27 degrees would pay $50,000. And it's paid in the number of degrees above. So on one day, you might get 28, that's 1 degree. And then on another day, you might get 29, that's 2 degrees. So in total, that's 3 degrees or $150,000 worth of power. Okay, so let's have a look, and we can visualize this on our histogram. 2009, we'd want compensation. 2008, we'd want some form of compensation. So we come up with a little bit of a price here. And we can see there, that's the price. You can 49 or just over 10% in terms of that, which is pretty much in line with how a lot of contracts work. You can look around the data, and you can actually sort of reduce it quite simply by, putting a strike in if you wanted to. There we go. Just put that down there. Change the sum insured. There we go. The maximum there. And then you can come up with a different premium. You should always be able to come up with a number that actually works. It's all about adjusting, and that's where parametric products are quite important, because you can quite easily adjust the parameters in order to get a cover that suits you. Now, what I also think is very important at this point is to always try and make sure the data that you're using is fit for purpose for your contract. As a result of that, let's have a look at the data, and we just sort of slowly like to get a bit of a view as to what it looks like. And so we can, here's the data that's just come up. Delete. Play around with a little bit of a few things. Delete. And when I like to look at it, I mean, this data goes, as you can see, goes a fair way down. In fact, it goes all the way down to, I think we get over 100 years of data. So you can always sort of get other times so that you can get, there we go, all the way down to 1910. This is the good thing about the BOM. You can really get a sense of this data and how it would have affected historically, because that's also how these contracts are actually calculated. There's a lot to do with historics. There's a lot to do with volatility, but the historical payouts are generally where you start to get your pricing. A few other bits and bobs that go into the price. But if we look at that and we just insert a chart here, just try and get one that we think works. I always like those little scatter diagram. It looks a bit bunched up at the moment, but you can see that we start to play around with it a bit. And then you can get a sense of where you think you should not be. And obviously, you look at the left hand axis, and these are the temperatures here. Up around this through that 30, that's a concern. Well, pretty much anything over that period, over that, sort of those 140 odd years worth of data, you get a sense that it has been there before, and you want to be able to hedge yourself. And that's what we mean by something being fit for purpose. It's these outliers that will really concern you, and as a result of that, you want to hedge. And likewise with frost as well on the downside, it's exactly the same. But we're only looking at heat at the moment, so that gives us a sense of where we should be. Okay, so that's good. You can see that you might say that in this particular period, or you can then change your data there, and you can sort of just sort the data, data sort, and you might want to also do expand that sort, and we just want to sort measurement, and we want to go largest, smallest, and there you get a nice little chart there that does show you that days of 30 degrees and things like that, 30, 29, 28. And you can see that 2009, 8, 1940, if you back 94, all these areas there, which you can actually come up with a contract that actually fits or that hedges you. Okay, let's move that out of the way. So when you look at it, that's the contract that we would have for heat stress for canola. We do have a good flyer on that, which we're more than happy to provide you. It sort of does give you the same example, as to the events, as to how we describe them, and also how you can protect yield. Okay, let's now have a look at what we can do with frost. Slightly different type of contract. So let's go back, and same sort of region we can do. There's no problems there. I want to change that to minimum temperature this time. And we go back to our pricer. And this might be sort of a frost burn day for your wheat. And you might look at that and you can turn around and you can say, well, you know what? I think I'm going to have a concern. Once again, it happens around this anthesis period. And I think during that finishing burst of which you have, the spring rains have come through. And if you do get that a good break, spring break, and all of a sudden you do get that frost, you're going to suffer from a stem frost or a head frost. And I think it's super important that when you do look at it, when you are looking to hedge, that you do sort of say, well, okay, I want to protect a stem frost. I also want to protect a head frost. We actually can do that quite nicely. We do a combination of covers that cover both of them. But just as a guide, I just thought we'd just do this simple one here, because frost, as we know, is quite complicated. You'll also find that some growers will use the grid, other growers will use the weather station. That's perfectly fine to try and get these contracts. As we said, frost is always a little bit difficult, but we have a combination of covers that we put together to cover both the stem and the head frost. Okay, so let's just have a look. It might be sort of middle of August this time, and we'll just go there to middle of August, middle of September. I know in some areas I might just change that, particularly down south. That's a little bit later than that people have a concern. So I'll just move that around, and we get a sense that what's that? No, don't go that too far. I just want to go back to September. There we go. Might do. Put a 0 degrees in there and just see what the data looks like. As you can see, quite a lot around that September. And let's just push that out a bit. And let's just push that out a little bit to maybe there. And as you can see that all of a sudden things do change quite dramatically. And you don't want to be caught out if the phenology of your plant, and talk to your agronomist. When is it most at risk? That's when we start to put the contracts in, and that's when it is important. So if we just put a -2 in, for instance, you can see that it changes quite dramatically. -1. we get a little. So this is something we could probably work with. Once again, we want to get paid as soon as that event occurs, and $50,000 we might compensation, because remember the yield that you lose through frost, stem frost is obviously quite catastrophic. A head frost is not. You just got severe or reduced yield that you'll only know when you get to harvest time. So rather you'd be looking at 3 tonne to the hectare. You might only get 1.5 if you have frost over that area, and that's a significant reduced yield. And the weather certificate is designed to compensate you for that. Okay, in this case here, we'll play around with it, and that's what we've allowed. We're only hedging 100,000 here. Let's see what the cost comes up. It comes up to around that 14%. We can change it around a little bit, and the way I would do that is just by changing a few of the parameters. Reduce that by a week, maybe. There we go, and put that up to 300,000. You get a sense that when you look at parametrics, they're not like traditional forms of cover. These are non-indemnity types of cover, which means they get paid as soon as it happens. So it's very important that you always get to read. Read the policies, make sure you fully understand it. To me, that is super important. Because you've really got to be clear about what's happening. And let's go back here. Change that. Change the date a little bit. There we go. And to be clear, I think is really important on your contracts, and just to make sure that you fully understand them. There we go. Okay. Now this particular contract is very similar indeed. As you can see, it's had quite a few payouts here, and that's why it's reflected in the price. But look what I do if I just change the strike. Oops, I could just change that. Change the strike quite quickly. Oops, no, I just want to change that to 50,000. There we go. And you can see once again that it might be dramatic, it might not be within your budget, but you can always come down to a contract that actually works for you. Now, with this type of contract, it is paid when the threshold is met, the trigger occurs and the strike occurs. If it's 0 strike, it paid out straight away. If you have a 1-day strike or a half-a-day strike or a half-a-degree strike, then it gets paid after that. So it's always important to understand how that works. And of course, we can certainly help with your understanding of how these contracts actually work. They are actually noted out there, in terms of how the terms are, and they're only a couple of pages long, so they're not long and lengthy. If this event happens, if the threshold is met, the triggers are met, the strike is met, then the payout occurs, no question. With all these types of contracts, everything is set up front, so that there's no dispute towards the end. And we just please read them so you understand them. So if you don't understand them, then it's sort of one of those things which it's sort of embarrassing for both parties to have to go back to the terms. They're very simple to understand, but just be clear on them. And here you can see we've got a little cover there. As you can see, this one has paid out quite a bit, hence its cost. Okay, right. So that's the end of this tutorial. Remember, we've just covered off on 2. This is a heat stress for canola, and it's also a stem frost and a frost burn for any other broadacre, probably wheat and also barley. Okay, so let's stay tuned for the next one, and that'll be coming to you soon. Thanks very much.